As a big fan of 3D platformers, I've been following the development of Frogun for over a year, and it was up there with some of my most anticipated games of 2022. For the uninitiated, Frogun is a retro-style 3D platformer with a low-poly aesthetic reminiscent of the 32-bit and 64-bit eras, but with a bit more of a modern feel, and not just because it has a grappling hook. But does this classically styled platformer feel good to play, or is it attempting to mimic an outdated era? Well, that's what I'm here to answer in GameXplain's review of Frogun for the Nintendo Switch. You play as Renata, who sets out to rescue her parents who haven't returned from an expedition. With the talking Frogun in hand, she sets out hot on the trails of her parents. It literally takes only 30 seconds to jump into the action, which I appreciated. The low poly aesthetic is eye-catching and instantly reminded me of classic games like Crash Bandicoot. But once I jumped into a level, I was more reminded of Super Mario 3D Land with the cool diorama-like levels. I loved them from the start, and on top of that, you can manipulate the camera to find hidden collectibles just like Captain Toad. And it's something I wish more platformers did. And there are quite a lot of challenges to complete in order to 100% the level. First, you have to collect every coin in the level Spyro style, and it's quite difficult, especially in the later levels. Then you have to complete the levels within a time limit and without dying, just like Crash Bandicoot. And speaking of the Bandicoot, no death runs and time trials are quite difficult. While Frogun wears its inspiration on its sleeve, it is how it draws elements from all these platformers that make it stand out amongst the crowd for better or worse. The Frogun acts as a grappling hook, killing enemies, collecting pots and activating switches or pulling blocks. The movement is slow, but it works for the game. For the majority of the game, it controls well enough. The slow pace and lack of coyote time took a while to get used to though. Once I grasped the game's pace, I started having a blast exploring the levels and finding collectibles. Finding all the coins isn't particularly hard in the first half of the game. In fact, it was zen-like running through visually vibrant levels with a cheerful soundtrack trying for 100%. The difficulty ramps up nicely, but then the issues start to arise. Eventually, new mechanics are introduced, and I initially loved the direction the game was going in. It pushed the difficulty up at a good pace, adding some tight jumps and quick reaction grapples. You can aim the Frogun when you have the time, but I pretty much exclusively relied on the auto target, which was fine for the slower moments, but once more difficult grapples had to be done at speed, the game starts to feel a little sloppy. The auto lock struggles when chaining grapples, and the number of times I died due to the grapple hook shooting just to the side of the target was infuriating. You can turn auto lock off, but that makes it even more difficult. On top of that, certain grapple points act like an extra jump, and these felt very inconsistent. Even grappling to the same point often resulted in wildly different jump trajectories that would cause a frustrating death over and over again. It was most apparent in the race levels. Here you have to race another character to the end of the level, and once again the first few races were slow and easy to beat, but the final three were so frustrating. The inconsistencies reared their ugly head the most on these levels, and I ended up hating them. The janky lock-on system, inconsistent movements, and at one point I would just die mid-air for no reason on one of these levels. The races made me almost put the game down, but I persevered. Once they were over, I enjoyed the other slower levels. Yes, the difficulty was still there, but they were nowhere near as annoying as the racing levels. These issues persisted throughout the whole game, so I eventually gave up on 100%, opting to run past the coins no matter how wrong it felt. Collecting 50% of the coins and dying just before a checkpoint due to the lock-on system was not fun. Another issue was pressing A to unpause the game would also register as me shooting the Frogun, which led to even more annoying deaths. The boss fights are cute and they offer a small bit of challenge, and they don't really stick out in my mind for better or worse and are par for the course given the boss fights of the genre. It's easy to see that Frogun is gorgeous, in an intentionally retro kind of way. I haven't played many low poly games myself, so the old school 3D look is a breath of fresh air. As someone whose two first consoles were N64 and PS1, Frogun is extremely nostalgic and feels like it is an obscure platformer from my childhood. It was the defining feature in all the pre-release coverage I watched, and after beating it, it is still the game's best feature. I mostly played on handheld because of how nice the colours looked on the OLED. I hope more indies adopt this art style because it's executed perfectly in Frogun. There's plenty of variety in environments running through bright jungle temples, dark dreary swamps and menacing but vibrant lava caverns, to name a few. The animations are charming. Renata does a cool spin when she grapples, and to top it all off, she closes one eye when shooting the Frogun as if she's taking aim. And this extends to the enemy designs too. The basic fly enemies are charming with their massive eyes, and even small things like how the mice in the ice levels have snowboarding goggles ooze personality. To wrap it all up, the soundtrack is cheerful and I couldn't help but smile listening to the tracks. Especially the racing level music, which I had to listen to way more than anything else in the game, and I still love it, so that's a true testament to how good this track is.
Hey!
Frogun's presentation is phenomenal, and I just wish I could say the same about its mechanics. The most frustrating part about Frogun is how great the game could be if the lock-on mechanic was tightened up. It has the right idea of ramping up the difficulty, introducing some new and fun mechanics as the game progresses. If they can iron out the inconsistencies, then this will be a difficult but fun game to 100%. But as for now, it's okay for a run through, and that's it. The game is like 60% there. The graphics are gorgeous, the level design is brilliant, and the mechanics work well when the levels are slower. But the other 40% consists of inconsistent mechanics that caused too many unnecessary deaths that ultimately left me feeling mixed on Frogun. A lot of my issues can be fixed through updates, so cleaning up the lock-on mechanic and fixing some of the inconsistencies can make this a must-play platformer, but as for now it has a good foundation but ultimately ended in frustration. There we have a review for Frogun on the Nintendo Switch. I would love to know what you think about the game, let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to check the videos out on the right, and while you're there you may as well subscribe. Thanks for watching, I really appreciate your time, and I'll see you all on the next video.